at our 8th discussion in the framework of the project audit of external policy of Ukraine. And today we are speaking about relationship between Ukraine and Italy. I would like to tell you about the support of our partners. This is the project Uniter and also USAID and also Marshall Foundation, and we thank for the support of this project. For us, this is a very interesting debate in the framework of which we are trying to understand our mutual interests and strategic cooperation in the European Union. Italy is a key country of the European Union, and today we can discuss our ideas with honorable guests, with the extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine to Italy, Yevgeniy Perelygin. Do you see and hear us well? Yes. So, extraordinary plenipotentiary ambassador of Italy in Ukraine, Fabrizio Romano. Добрий день. And Yevgeniy Yenin, Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine of International Legal Cooperation, and Vasyl, Khymynets, Director of the First European Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and I'm Kateryna, Zarembo, Deputy Director of Institute of World Policy, and we made foreign policy audit, Ukraine, Italy, and now I'm going to share key ideas and conclusions of our audit, and then we are going to discuss these issues, and we'll have some questions. Firstly, I would like to say that the key conclusions that we have reached is that Italy is not a weak link in Europe, and this is the good news. And those fears in Ukraine, they are partly grounded. Of course, Italy is a strategic partner of Russia, but Italy has strong connection and cooperation with the European Union and other states, and we hope for a support of Italy and continuation of sanctions, and that Italy will support territorial integrity of Ukraine, and this is done in the framework of cooperation among European states. Italy is a priority partner in trade. This is country number 1 for Ukrainian export in Europe, and third country on the trade turnover after Germany and Poland, and Ukraine is also strategic market for Italy. So our interests mostly coincide, but there is a number of problems connected with the investment climate, business climate in Ukraine that is not favorable at the moment. There are some stereotypes connected with war. They believe that tanks are in the streets, and that there is a information component that is not correspond the situation, and some enterprises that produce for Italy, they do not have quality brand. So the raw materials mostly exported and made in Ukraine should be a powerful brand that is competitive. As to the contacts at the level of public, interesting conclusions were made in Ukraine. Of course, Italy is the cradle of culture, and people are interested in Italy and the methods of information campaigns. So people do not clearly understand what it means, and what Ukraine for Italy is terra incognita. So people do not know a lot about Ukraine, only separate people know. They are scientists usually, so the public doesn't know a lot about Ukraine. There are Ukrainian community in Italy, and this is a powerful community, and the Ukrainians, they have their community that is integrated in the society. They know the language, so there is positive image, and it is one of the factors why there is no fear in connection with the Ukrainians, and that's why Italians support visa-free regime for Ukrainians. So, people, they do not know about Ukraine. They understand that these are good people, but they do not know about the country. So we propose some decisions, and we outlined all these ideas in our brochure, and we invite everyone to discuss these challenges and the ways how to solve these problems. And I would like to give the floor to Extraordinary Plenipotentiary Ambassador of Ukraine, Yevgeniy Perelygin, and I would like that each would have 5 minutes. And please, you are given the floor. Thank you. I'm glad to join this meeting. Good afternoon, my dear friends, and I'm glad to welcome my colleagues, my curator, Vasyl Vasilyevich, and I would like to state that as a practical diplomat, I believe that today's meeting, and all other conferences conducted by the Institute of World Policy, that this is a very powerful and important event. So the starting point for analysis of relationship between Ukraine and Italy, and also to develop proper recommendations, I believe that we should analyze modern national interests of both countries. So what are the interests, I mean global, regional, and national, for example, interests like this of Italy. So what are the sectors? There should be 3 of them. The main priorities, these are global and regional security, counteracting illegal migration, and of course, social and economic development of the country and economic growth. If we understand all 3 priorities and find our place in order to cooperate in these priorities, I hope that our relationship will be more intense, and we, as David Carnegie said, we can make our relationship better and to find new partnership. So about global and regional security issues. So this is a priority, but the objective idea is that we are not a NATO country, and together with Italy we cannot elaborate decisions that would help to improve security in the region and to counteract the threat of terrorism. As to regional security and counteracting illegal migration, we also cannot play a key role in this because we are not members of European Union who permanently discuss and allocate financial resources to counteract illegal migration. As to economic development and growth and social economic area, I believe that Ukraine, and you said it in your presentation, can and should play a key role. What we mean by saying a key role in the development, in the social and economic sphere, and in trade cooperation. You said about Made in Ukraine brand that is unknown or less known in Italy, and we cannot go there in the market in a broad way. But today, a new opportunity opens, and if we make this brand made in Ukraine, brand made with Italy, so this concept would play a good role and would establish a link between Ukraine and Italy, and also it would allow Ukraine to enter to broader European markets and to traditional markets of Italy in Africa and Latin America. And also, I would like to say that there are 4 priority areas where Ukraine works together with Italy: external policy, political contacts, political platform for the development of our relationship. And the Ambassador Fabrizio Romano in Kiev stated that during the last 2 years there were many meetings and events, political events, that it exceeded all the work that was carried out for 22 years. So both Ukrainian and Italian officials created a very powerful political platform for further realization of the projects. Next, interparliamentary cooperation. During the previous year, the number of delegations and the number of contacts, both official and unofficial, reached the highest level. And that's why it's not a coincidence that the last year Italian Parliament rejected 10 draft resolutions on cancellation of sanctions against Russia. And 2 days ago, Senate of Italy, by the majority of votes, 153 times more, they rejected 2 more resolutions concerning cancellation of economic sanctions against Russia. That's why, as of today, we have a reliable partner that works in order to preserve European solidarity and to preserve those joint efforts that the EU adopted among 28 states. And also interregional cooperation. And here we have prospects, really great prospects. And here we should take into account that Italy is the best example when the unitary state has broad responsibilities in the regions, and it preserves its unity, but it provides the regions broad responsibilities for cooperation, and we can share this experience, and we can broaden our regional cooperation, and our regions and oblasts can demonstrate the project of decentralization that we discussed for 2 years. And here we could demonstrate how economically, humanitarily, and culturally the regions are able to cooperate with the regions of Italy. And it's enough to see that Kiev and Florence, they have friendship for 50 years. We have Liguria and Odessa. We have Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, who actively cooperate with Emilia-Romagna and Bologna. And we created the basis, but we are lacking inter-regional development that would be in the real projects and cooperation. And at the end, I would like to go back to economic and trade, economic cooperation. There was a peak of our cooperation in the sphere in 2011, 2012, when the turnover was about $5 billion, and between Ukraine and Italy, and this turnover fall down to there were some objective and subjective reasons for this, and it is now about $3 billion, and we should make real projects in economic and energy, agricultural infrastructure cooperation, and Italy has great experience in this. I can assure you that the next conference that will be organized by the Institute of the World Policy and will be devoted to Ukraine and Italy will state other figures, and I would like to thank Kateryna for wonderful materials and analytical work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, interesting things you told us about, and thank you for your cooperation with us. And I would like to give the floor to Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Ambassador of Italy to Ukraine, Fabrizio Romano. Please, would you comment on this? Because I see that government of Italy is a friend of Ukraine, but there are many other political forces, and if they come to power during next election, this partnership may end. So, and in the Council of Liguria, there was voting on Crimea, and it influences negatively, and there's some suspicion about it. Could you comment on this?
First of all, let me thank you for the invitation. Let me say hello to all the people present, and buongiorno al mio amico Yevgen. Okay, I will start by commenting this episode in Liguria, and then if I may, I will give you my take on Italian-Ukrainian relations, since I have almost concluded my mission here, so it's a good occasion also to have a sum up of what happened during these 4 years and a half. As to Liguria, I mean, I'm not very well aware of what happened, but it seems to me that it belongs to the reality of politics to have regional entities who take this kind of decisions. I mean, it happened with Veneto. And it may happen in other regions. I mean, it's what we call the political dialectic. You have people suggesting to the government a certain line, but it's nothing more than a suggestion. And we experienced it with the Veneto decision, the same situation, and the answer of the Italian government, of the state, was that the regions, they don't have competence in foreign politics. The Italian foreign policy is in line with the European Union obligations. It's in line with the Italian position is probably one of the most predictable and, if you like, serious, consistent with the line of European Union. You may remember that Italy is the idea of waging sanctions for the illegal annexions of Crimea has been discussed during the Italian presidency of the European Union. You know that Italy is one of the best supporters of the visa-free regime for Ukraine. You know that Italy is one of the two countries who proposed in Moscow a démarche in order to have Sarchenko liberated, and Italy is one of the countries who has considered the Minsk agreement to be, as the Prime Minister said, the star reference for the peace process in Ukraine. So I mean, I wouldn't consider I would consider what was happening now in Liguria and in Lombardia in this light. But I would like also to make a couple of comments on our general relations by starting with the consideration that your booklet, your discussion paper is very interesting, and I'm really very thankful that you had the time to make such a profound and deep and comprehensive work, which will be used the next years by diplomats, by people, by workers of international in the international relations. But in a couple of minutes, just to say some words about my experience here. When I arrived, I had some ideas, and my engagement at the time was mainly focused on the economic relations between Italy and Ukraine. Why? Because I noticed, watching to the geographical map, that you had Italian business very present and very developed in Eastern Europe, Eastern from the Italian point of view, Western Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, Czechia, from the Ukrainian point of view. But we had thousands of enterprises there. We had very big groups, not so many in Russia, but very big groups working actively in Russia and Ukraine. Okay, with 300 enterprises were registered, but in fact, most of them, they only had just an office here, but not working. So my idea was to do something in order to develop a potential which was enormous, if you consider that the Eastern Europe is one of the area of interest of Italy. Okay, in your discussion paper, you underline that our priority is in the Mediterranean, but I would also add that the Eastern Europe, starting from former Yugoslavia to Ukraine, Russia, is a very important area for Italy. I mean, not a priority as Mediterranean, but it's second best. Okay, I noticed that, so I arrived. I tried to invite as more as possible entrepreneurs. So we started with a very big initiative, 45 big companies in the construction, in the building sector, and I wanted to continue in that way, but things changed. So my mission became essentially a political mission, and of course I did try not to forget that Italy is a member of G7, but is a superpower in cultural terms. So we are cultural superpower number one. So I tried also to develop culture.
Your Excellency, could I ask you to summarize your intervention now, and you will be able to get back to your points during the question-answer session?
Yeah, okay. So in a very short terms, my mission became more political, but I would say that because of the many visits we are talking, that also Ambassador Perelygin has quoted, because of that we could, together with Yevgen, could pave the way in order to exploit our potential and launch a friendship, a cooperation, a collaboration which so far has been not at the level that the relation among two countries, between two countries, deserve.
Дякую дуже. Ми також сподіваємося, що буде продовжуватися у наступні роки.
I hope that the dynamics will continue, and now the Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Yevgeniy Yenin, would like to provide his opinion on Ukrainian-Italian relations. You are given the floor. Thank you for your invitation. Your discussion paper is very in-depth analysis, and it will help in development of our bilateral relations. Mr. Ambassador told about his first impressions when he arrived to Ukraine. I would like also to tell about my impressions of first approach to Ukrainian-Italian relations. There were some contradictory and difficult pages in the history, but I think that Mr. Ambassador may confirm that those contradictory issues have already been resolved. They concerned human rights violations and so on. Mr. Perelygin and Ambassador and Mr. Ambassador Romano, they already told about Ukrainian-Italian relations history, and our mission is to disillusion myths in our relations. Thank you to your analytical research. Your findings are in support of these relations, which can be developed. Very many things can be done in Italy to change stereotypes in Ukrainian-Italian relations, and commonplace thought that prospects of relations with Ukraine and Italy should be seen through the prism of its relations with Russia. Last year, we had record high dynamics of political contacts between Italy and Ukraine, and it would be very critical at this stage to convert these political arrangements into specific joint Ukrainian-Italian projects. The domains have already been identified. Now we should implement those projects. This is the task not only of the foreign affairs ministries. This is also the question for experts and businessmen who help to resolve these issues. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Yevgen.
And I give the floor to Vasyl Khymynets, Director of the First European Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Vasyl, please, could you share your opinion about Ukraine and Italy relationship, and what are the ministerial view on this? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, and Alena, Kateryna. Thank you for this invitation. And it has been already stated that it is the 8th meeting, and I'm glad that I'm here for the 4th time. And starting from discussion on Germany, France, and now Italy. So these are the states that belong to First European Department. But also I would like to note with pleasure that each discussion is really valuable and useful, and organizers create a platform for us for constructive discussions to discuss matters, to discuss cooperation between our states, and also identification of priorities for further cooperation. Of course, today's discussion is very important because we are speaking about very important country, Italy, that has a valuable place in the European Union and in other international relationships and structures. And evident is that we have interests in cooperation. We need bilateral and multilateral cooperation at the level of international organizations. Mr. Ambassador Perelygin named the reasons, and I agree that Italy is really important for us. Also, I would like to draw attention to the fact, and I would like to note that today's state of political dialogue is dynamic and constructive. Thus, we need also to look at our future and to analyze overall situation that exists in the European Union, taking into account the referendum results. We see that now popular parties of anti-European views and populist parties. And I believe that I support the idea that we do not know what situation can be in Italy if we take into account these recent elections. We see that parties, anti-European parties, they are popular. That's why, of course, we should work in this area. We should find our allies in political spectrum. But at the same time, we should note that the Prime Minister and the government, they send clear signals that they support European principles, and for us this is very important. Because this unity in Europe is good for us, and this will be good for Ukraine to realize our foreign tasks, and also for us economic cooperation is of importance. And last autumn there were some trade mission, and now we prepare the next meeting. There is interest from our entrepreneurs and Italian entrepreneurs, and I had a discussion with Mr. Romano, and we shared our opinion on prospects, and we believe that there is a necessity to broadly involve Italian small and medium-sized business, and we should actively work in order to create favorable conditions. Also, regional cooperation is very important in the context of the previous elections that happened, and maybe there will be some other elections and other councils. So our ministry works on the concept to strengthen regional cooperation, taking into account all our oblasts, and we prepare a concept document that will be discussed at the national level. And also of importance is cooperation among youth, and in the sphere of education we have great plans there. I would like to say that we have a lot of work to do. We understand the areas we should work on, and also I will be glad if civil society would get more involvement and cooperate with us in order to achieve those goals that are before us. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. I would like to note that all people who are here, they were involved in the preparation of our analytical work, and we are grateful to them. So please tell us, are you still with us? No, he is not available now. Yes, we have connection. Okay, thank you, Yevgeniy. So please now you can ask your questions. Firstly, maybe questions to Mr. Perelygin, because he has to leave soon. So please, you may ask your questions. Do you have questions or comments? Please, Mikhail. Thank you. Please name yourself first. Mikhailo Gonchar, Global Strategy 21. Good afternoon. We were cooperating not only in Italian issues, but in many other areas. Thank you very much for this work. It is done greatly. The only thing I can say, maybe there is some ideas that we aspire to, but we shouldn't close our eyes on some realia of today and realia of Ukraine and Italy cooperation. The visit of the Prime Minister Renzi to St. Petersburg and taking part in the forum, and if we analyze what he said there, I won't repeat what we described with Matteo Cazzolani that we presented in our article in Zerkalo Tizhnya newspaper. We had a critical view on the relationship between Ukraine and Italy, and I would like to draw your attention to some practical things that we shouldn't forget. Of course, now we see the situation when Ukrainian and Italian interests coincide and they want to continue sanctions against Russia. But we should understand one thing. Business interests in Italy, they prevail. Matteo Renzi stated in St. Petersburg about the interests of Italy to restart the project of South Stream. And when this agreement will be reached with Russian side, Italian government will take another position as to the regime of sanctions towards Russia. So they has already been changing their position. So there is also continuation of military and technical cooperation of Italy and with aggressive state against Ukraine. And this cooperation was not stopped. The next, any company, you've mentioned it, and I don't agree with this. Any is one of the main business entity, not only throughout the world. And in this context, pay attention that any and government, they didn't protest against annexation of Crimea, and any lost the project of a gas extraction in the south sector of the Black Sea near Kerch area, where previously Ukrainian side signed a contract on the distribution of the products. So they just don't want to speak about it. And ENI has brought cooperation with Gazprom and other Russian companies in Russia. And in Kazakhstan, Kashagan field, and ENI can get bankrupt in several years, and that will be the story of corruption. And this is the issue to which the attention was not drawn to. I understand the diplomats. I don't want to cite Elrond, but as people, we should be objective and we should pay attention to these issues. So my question to Mr. Ambassador Perelygin and maybe also to Mr. Romano, of course they will react on this, but I believe that there are some things when friends, and of course Italy is a friend of Ukraine, we should point out to those things that are going on. So sometimes maybe we should speak to our friends, and maybe sometimes we should provide Italians with understanding that there can be some changes in the relationship because some relationship is inadequate. So we can work with British companies or with South Korean companies, and the products, we can find the same products, and the will be lower. So this is an example. It doesn't mean that we should do this, but there is a choice. That's why we understand that policy is pragmatic as business, and we should create framework of this pragmatic approach. And the partner should adhere to financial interests, of course, and his profit interests, because people want to get profit, but also partners should take into account that international law is violated by the state in relation to other state, and are there possibilities in the embassy of Ukraine? Is there readiness to change the attitude, approach, and to be more rigid? Maybe there is such a necessity. Maybe Ambassador Romano won't agree with me. Of course, we believe that we should cooperate and to communicate, but I believe that we should revise our relationship. Thank you. Thank you for this critical view. Yevgeniy, please. Good afternoon. I greet Mikhail. Of course, we have been cooperating for many years, and it's very interesting. And of course, I read your article in Zerkalo Tyzhny newspaper, and in some things I disagree. In what you said about the necessity to say to our partners what they should do, and I disagree with rigid approach. I believe that more practical approach is that we should not dictate, but we should propose an alternative to Italian companies and to Italy on the whole, that we should promote Ukraine as a good partner. And in my presentation, I said that we should gain this partnership. Unfortunately, historically, our development of our relationship do not provide us with opportunity to find many points of contact. But today, if we propose to any company the alternative, we cannot just say, do not work with them, but work with us. We should show in what way any will be more profitable to work with reliable European partner Ukraine than just get money in other country. This is first. Second, you are mistaken when you say that the government of Italy and any did not react on the annexation of Crimea. This is a mistake. Government reacted together with the governments of 28 country members when they introduced first sanctions against Russian officials, against Russia, because of annexation of Crimea. As to any, this is a private company that can react or it may not react. But in order that any reacted for the benefit of position of Ukraine, we should work with any. And it's about any and other energy projects. About Prime Minister visit to St. Petersburg, and also about the aim of the visit, I would say that it is not for me to comment on his taking part in St. Petersburg forum, but we should make some conclusions on how this visit was made and what contracts and what economic prospects were reached by the Russian party for Italian companies, and also we should get a serious approach to it and to propose alternative. Ukraine today is an attractive market. It can be an attractive market for the rest of the countries, and our friends repeat, and yesterday it was said by one of the Euro deputies, we should do and make practical conclusions and to go into practical field. And in this, I see our task not to dictate, but to propose alternatives. Thank you.
Mr. Roman, can you react?
As short as possible, because I totally agree with Yevgen on the answer. I just add a comment. I mean, of course, every country has the possibility to review the whole of relations or bilateral relation with another country if this country behave in a way that the first country doesn't like. But if I bring your position to extreme consequences, okay, you criticize Italy for a number of reasons, but you should criticize, and so you propose to review relations as a possibility. But the same possibility should be contemplated as to relations with other countries who have similar position. I don't want to quote the countries, but there are big European countries at national level who did choices which are not liked in Ukraine. As in particular to the visit of Matteo Renzi in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, sorry. Don't forget that the visit, there was another important visitor who was Juncker. So if I bring to extreme consequence, you should also review the relations with European Union. So that this is my point of view. Thank you very much.
Дякую, пане Василю. Чи хотіли?
Thank you. Would you like to add something? I agree with Mr. Mikhail that this is our task to make our European partners sure in our alternatives, what can we offer, what we can propose, and to demonstrate prospects, to demonstrate that Ukraine is a great country with a prospective market which should become attractive for Italian and other partners, and on the other hand, we have been always addressing such issues as demonstrating specific situations when the market of our neighboring countries. Nowadays, it depends on the will of one person. And both in business, in politics, in sports, there are rules, and where rules of the games have been violated, I don't see any prospects that further activities can be successful. This is the task, this is the goal. You can have tomorrow some benefits, but you don't know what you will have the day after tomorrow. We address this. On the other hand, you can see what is the situation in Europe and European countries, as I have already said. Very high popularity have been achieved by the parties which are populist, Eurosceptical. And we should not underevaluate them, underassess them. We should have dialogue with all the countries in Europe and with all other countries, because international and European values, they are those things which should not be betrayed by us. We should put more efforts to change the this bad trend, which is present not only in Italy but in other countries as well, and it is not favorable for us. And believe us that we have been working in this aspect with those diplomatic instruments and tools that we possess, and it is very important for us to use joint consolidated efforts to work on the reforms and to demonstrate real alternatives. Thank you, Mr. Vasyl. Yes, the threat of changing political environment in Italy and is rather close, not far. Even early re-elections are possible in Italy. So we should not underestimate the threats in our relations.
I wanted to add a remark, a general remark, because we have been raising the question of so-called populist parties in Italy, and recently the Five Star Movement has won the local elections and is considered an anti-European party. Indeed, I noticed a very interesting statement made by the head of the party, Beppe Grillo, and he said, we are not so Eurosceptical as you think. If we want to change Europe, and we think that if we want to change, we want to change Europe from the inside and not from outside, not leaving Europe. That's something new, very new.
Дякую дуже. Прошу інші коментарі.
Thank you very much. Please now your other comments and questions are welcome.
Юлія Вольфовська, Ukraine Crisis Media Center.
There have been cases when the public Italian television, for example, was broadcasting some information which is factually incorrect or which is the direct reflection of the propaganda, of the Russian propaganda. I'm talking particularly about the public television, which is formed from the taxes paid by the Italian citizens. In your opinion, should the Italian authorities do something about it? Is it in the competence of Italian authorities to intervene in this situation, as this information influences a lot the public opinion in Italy? Thank you.
Дякуємо за запитання. Прошу.
Could you
Чи може
of information was not proper, and what exactly you mean by Russian propaganda in Italy? Because I mean, we don't watch Russia today.
For example, there have been some services, some programs on the public television, on Italian public television. A recent example is from the TG Rai 2, Rai 2. When the TV host was reporting from eastern Ukraine, but he made lots of factual mistakes, and instead of reporting the actual facts, he was presenting the abstract narrative and lots of theses that are used from the Russian propaganda. There have been other cases, and we can quote it in a more detailed way and more factual way. I cannot remember them in a detailed way now, but here is the focus that this is the public television, and the information it broadcasts is based on misinformation and on propaganda. I'm talking about particular cases, not in general.
Frankly, it's difficult for me to answer to this kind of question. If Italian authorities can do something in order to change a point of view, if we're talking about a point of view of a journalist, of course it's state TV, but a journalist is independent within the framework of state TV. So it would be, I mean, it's not in our system to influence to journalists. If the journalist made factual mistakes. Yes, of course, they can call him, and the director of the channel can argue on that. Yes, of course, that can be done.
Від себе я додам, що
I would like to add that reference to Russian sources sometimes present and then they are not correct. And there is a story with happy end about finding of Italian pictures that were stolen from the museum of Verona, and now they are present in the Khymynets Museum. And these were Ukrainian border guards who found them. And the news about it was presented in the Kateryna, and they cited Russian sources thus. And by local efforts, we made it, and the Ukraine Crisis Media Center and the Institute of World Policy also helped in this. These were the tours for journalists. And of course, we cannot compare this with state strategy, but this is better than nothing. And we should work on a systemic basis in this direction. Vasyl, are going to comment on this about media in Italy, about sources of information. The situation in Italy we should find opportunities to increase our information presence in this country. And we should represent our state more. And at the start, I mentioned that it is very important to involve civil society in this process, and there are opportunities to organize visits of Italian journalists, and this is really important. And from the ministry, I'm sure that also Ambassador Perelygin will support this idea that these visits should be frequent and people should come here to Ukraine and they should study the situation at site. And this is weird. We live in times of the systems of communication that are highly developed, but we are in the situation where people believe different stereotypes and they live under the influence of propaganda. And for me, and I believe that you agree with my opinion, this is nonsense to live in such a way and believe in such things. So, once again, we are ready to help in organizing visits of the journalists, and also let's think together how we can use the potential of our Ukrainian community in Italy in order to represent Ukraine better to the Italian public. I'm sorry I repeat, but of course there is an importance of regional cooperation and the role of cities who are friends among themselves. This is the most effective way when people get together, they meet each other in person, and there are no intermediaries. So this form, we should use it and believe that this is our priority. This is a wonderful sort of cooperation in Europe, and after the Second World War, French and German reconciliation, it would be impossible without civil society, without interregional cooperation, and the friendship among cities, and also the relationship between Poland and Germany would be impossible without this cooperation. So I believe that we should pay more attention to this aspect. Thank you, Yevgeny. You are present always in the media sphere, and there was a colossal step forward in the development of the relationship, and Republika is one of the first media who cited Ukrainian media agencies. So what are the prospects in this sphere? So we have problems in the sphere. We should take into account that national media of Italy, they have their own correspondents in Moscow, and they do not have correspondents in Kiev. That's why daily informing of by the correspondents of all national channels, and they're informing of readers and viewers from Moscow, they distort a real picture. And the answer of Ukraine for this should be exclusively focused on journalist sources. So previous speaker asked about Russian propaganda on TV. In Italy, propaganda is believed to be any speeches of state officials, state representatives. Why? Because they say not from themselves, but on behalf of the state institution, party, and that's why information is more valuable when they get this information from journalists and not from state officials. That's why visits that were made and were organized by the Institute of the World Policy, they had really great effect when the journalists from of Italy or representatives of NGO, when they returned, they studied the situation, real situation in the Ukraine, and then they continued to highlight the events and trends that are in our country. We should note that, unfortunately, aspirations of these people, their motivation after the visit to Ukraine, it continued for a month or two, and then we should invite them again or to create proper conditions. Secondly, you've mentioned about Republika. I believe that the real achievement of the embassy was not that we were in the articles of these parties or in the spotlight of the media, but the important is our effort that we proposed to get the information not just from the embassies, but from Ukrainian information agencies. To get the information from information agencies of Ukraine, the problem lies that the news appear in Ukrainian, maybe in Russian, and only separate information agencies such as UNIAN, they translate this news in an hour or two into English, and they do not translate it into Italian. That's why there is a competition of information when there is a news from the correspondent from Moscow in Italian or in Ukrainian and Russian language from Kiev. So in this competition, the news from Moscow wins, and this is a problem on which we should work. And I can say that there is an agreement of central information agencies of Italy to have some agreements with Ukrainian information agencies in order to supply information. But as of today, these agreements are not possible to realize without financing, proper financing of our information agencies. So it's rather difficult to send, for example, 20 pieces of news that were already translated. So for our agencies, this is a problem. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And now we have time for one or two questions. Please.
Well, I invite everyone to continue our discussions in online mode. You can send your proposals and comments and remarks to our Facebook page and email. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your very interesting speeches and impressions you shared with us today. And next week, and on July 11th, we will have the next press briefing on our relations with Slovakia.